From the St. Francis Yacht Club in San Francisco, this is the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon, hosted by Ron Young.
Welcome to the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon, live from the virtual grill room of the St. Francis Yacht Club. So lots of folks think about going cruising. Lots of people spend their whole lives talking about when they retire, they're going to go up to the Northwest or they're going to go to Caribbean or the South Seas. And they talk about it. And every now and then, somebody actually does it. Our guests today are among those heroes. They actually packed it all up, got themselves a beautiful Ocean Alexander 548 and headed to the Northwest. And by the Northwest, I mean all the way along the inland passage to Glacier Bay and onto the vast wilderness of Sitka and Juneau, Alaska, aboard their beautiful yacht, Teak Holly. We're going to get to hear all about their adventure today firsthand. So welcome to Wednesday Yachting Luncheon, Jeff and Holly.
Thank you, Ron. I'm Jeff, and this is Holly.
Hi.
Of Teak and Holly. We'll give you a glimpse of 4,000 miles of travel we did over the summer last year, and we're going back again this year.
So Jeff, when was the first time you were on any kind of boat? And what was that boat and the occasion? And then Holly, the same question. So what kind of boat?
Yeah, so for me as a young person, I spent time on speedboats and small sailboats, had a Coronado 15 for many years that I raced and played with down in Southern California. During college, did a little bit of cruising on larger sailboats, but had probably never been on a power boat or never owned a power boat bigger than 25 feet until we stepped up to Teak and Holly about a year and a half, 2 years ago now.
I grew up in Missouri and we had a John boat and a bass boat, and I bass fished, and I love to fish. I'm the fisherman of the group, but Alaska fishing's a lot different and way more fun.
What about the size of the fish?
They're considerably larger, yes.
We won't spoil the photos, but you'll see something pretty amazing that might have been an Alaska state record.
How long ago did you buy Teak and Holly?
So it must have been 21, because we bought it in June
21.
of the year prior, and I cruised it in the San Juans for about 3 weeks, kind of training up. I'd never captained a boat bigger than 22 or 23 feet. We went to 62 overall. So I spent about 3 weeks with 3 captains training up that first year in the San Juan Islands, which will be fun to talk about with the group as it relates to the Commodore's cruise this year. Then we brought it back to San Francisco, kept it through the winter. We left May 9th from the St. Francis and headed north, and we're there through August.
We're going to see pictures of the boat, but just give us some specs. What's it weigh and how many staterooms? What's your typical cruising speed?
Yeah, so we're 55 feet in the waterline, 62 overall. We're an interesting aspect of it that I didn't appreciate is we're about 18 feet wide, which really makes the interior quite spacious. It's lovely. There are 3 staterooms, 2 heads, there's 3 levels, and we weigh 75,000 pounds. It is 23 years old. It's a year 2000.
And what's your typical cruising speed, typically?
10 knots. It'll go 21, but we typically cruise at about 10.
And so what's the cruising range at that speed?
800 miles.
And so you're paying attention to your trip so that you don't get ever lower than a quarter of the tank or whatever the heck it happens to be.
That's right.
Tell us about your toys on board.
We have a 12-foot tender powered by a 30 horsepower Tohatsu motor. It's been great, rock solid overall. And we have 3 paddle boards that can be rigged as rowing shells, paddleable kayaks, or stand-up paddle boards, as well as a foldable kayak, an Oru kayak that's been spectacular.
And when you brought it up north, did you take it in a straight shot with a skipper? Or did you stop along the way? How'd you structure getting the boat north from the Bay Area to begin with?
Yeah, we hired a captain, Jim Fuller, to take it from the St. Francis up to Sydney at the bottom of British Columbia. I had done the offshore work before, and I still work full time. And so for time convenience, Jim brought it up to Sydney for us. It took about 5 days running 24-hour days from here up to Sydney. We had a good tight weather window. And then I stepped on board towards the end of May and then took it all the way up to Juneau, with 2 others on board. And then Holly flew up to Juneau and joined us there for where we based for about 5 weeks.
And what's the longest stretch that you basically use the boat as your living space?
I'd say 3 or 4 weeks at
Yeah,
a
at least, yeah,
time.
3 or 4.
But I would say the largest amount of time up there, we were at anchor in very remote places and could go days and days without being anywhere near civilization. Up there might be a town of 500 people.
How often would you anchor with just one anchor, or how often would you anchor, if ever, with 2?
Almost always a single hook up there. In Canada, they do more anchor and stern tie, but we spent less time in Canada and more in Alaska on this trip.
Well, and you've put together a 23-minute video. That's really cool. And let's look at that.
Let's give
Okay.
it a go.
So in the, we broke this up into 3 sections. So I like to throw some trivia out there for things to look at or look for in each section. So this first section, there's a couple things. There's a plant that's the laxative for the bears when they come out of hibernation. Also, there's a type of footwear they call the Alaskan slipper. So look for those 2 things.
This is us waving goodbye to Teak and Holly from the St. Francis. And off it goes under the Golden Gate. This is Joe, my 83-year-old friend, and I. This is Joe. We've set out from Sydney, British Columbia at this point. This is one of our first anchorages. We had a little mechanical issue up in Juneau. One of the paddle boards. Tanner crab. King crab. We had crab pots, shrimp pots, and lots of fishing gear. My sister's birthday in Juneau. Looking down on the Juneau Harbor.
So I took all these pictures with my iPhone 13. This was a bear that came up and close and personal to me.
How close did you get?
15 feet. Oh, this is a plant that you want to remember.
This is on the Mendenhall Glacier. That's my son Patrick with the Alaskan flag. We went dog sledding, which was so much fun.
Wonderful.
So the dogs that they use for like the Iditarod and that, they send to these camps to take the tourists out so they stay in shape for the summers.
Probably caught 100 crab.
Wonderful. How long would you soak the pots down in the water?
Maybe overnight.
Typically overnight. It's better if you leave them longer, but we picked up and moved almost every day.
What kind of bait did you use and how much?
Fish heads, guts. Now we're up in Tracy Arm, south of Juneau. That's the South Sawyer Glacier. You can see a glacier calving there. Hundreds of seals.
So they were actually calving.
That's my daughter, Julia. Typical attire for Alaska.
She needed to see your picture.
That's our crystal ball that we have on board in case we need to look into the future or back into the past.
There were so many waterfalls everywhere.
And these are, 2,000-3,000 foot tall waterfalls. This is how you wash your boat in Alaska. You pull it up under a waterfall. We're serious.
Unbelievable.
Saw whales almost every day. Holly probably caught 100 salmon.
This was my first king salmon in Alaska, so it was exciting.
We're rappelling down into an ice cave here.
Are you rappelling?
That's
me. Holly. This is under about 1,000 feet of ice under the Mendenhall Glacier. Overall, we probably had 30 or 40 guests during the 4 months we were up there. Those are otters.
So they would seaplane in?
Yeah, seaplane or come into one of the ports. There's our tender on the boat at anchor.
And that's 1 hour later. You see the difference, how the water can change so quickly?
Yes.
The sunsets were unbelievable.
And the sun rises.
Is that a flounder? What's that?
That was a halibut. Well, that was our first, it was actually the month and a half. So it was May and June was what that covered.
Uh-huh. How close to the North Pole were you in at these different points?
Oh, quite far away. This is what you'd call the southeast of Alaska.
Uh-huh.
So we're still 800 or 1,000 miles from Anchorage.
Talk to me about navigational tools that you found helpful, and tell me where you were lat and long-wise.
Yeah, happy to. We upgraded the electronics on the boat pretty dramatically before the trip, put in brand new Furunos, also added sonar. We have a sonar that deploys underneath the base of the boat that can see 5,000 feet out ahead of us. Also added a water maker that'll make 700 gallons of water a day. So we have pretty sophisticated navigational tools on board, redundant in many ways, dual radar. And so the furthest north we went was about 59 degrees. And I think we're about 136 degrees west up in Glacier Bay. That was the furthest north we went. Then we came down to Sitka and out on the outside, and then worked our way back down through Canada.
So just so our audience can remember, San Francisco is at latitude 38 north and 128 west. So
that's correct.
It gives you a picture of where you guys were. And you were using, although you're using electronic navigation, we all know it's really comforting to be able to have black and white charts as well.
Yeah, we have many different layers of charts on board, as well as different publications and books. Holly's just picking up a couple of neat charts that we loved using. These are our paper charts that show the entire Northwest Passage. There's one for the north portion of the trip, and there's one for the south as well. And these were really the day-to-day charts we looked at when we met with people to ask for advice on fishing or shrimping or crabbing. We'd start there and then we'd dive in. I would say our primary navigation really though was navionics on our handheld tablet. We didn't use the Furuno system as much as we did navionics.
So when you're powering along at 10 knots, talk to us about piloting. How often are you autopilot and not, and what are the circumstances?
Sure, I'd say we're on autopilot a vast majority of the time, but there are many challenges in navigation. There's a lot of debris. For example, we cut an 8-inch diameter log in half on the way up along Vancouver Island that was submerged. And so you're dodging either logs, debris, icebergs, and at that point, you tend to go off autopilot and hand steer.
How did you know about the log? How much after it did you see it? Where was it? Tell us about this.
Oh, our 32-inch diameter brass propellers cut it in half. And
you
unfortunately, a chunk of it lodged in the propeller blades for a little while. Holly was not on board at that point. We were 3 on board. It just set out from Sydney, and I think we're just across the Queen Charlotte Sound. It made a heck of a racket, and we shut the engine down or pulled the throttle back immediately. By backing the boat forward and aft, we were able to dislodge the log. And we didn't get an enormous amount of vibration. You know, we were concerned. There were parts of the trip where I ran on a single engine for a different mechanical issue, but we were able to run on both engines. We ran all the way up to Glacier Bay, Sitka, and back. And then on the way home in Ketchikan, we found a diver to look at both the props, determined they could use some work, and we had them pulled. You'll see some photos of that. It was a fascinating thing to pull them while the boat was in the water, get them retuned, and then put back on.
So this is our second month in Alaska. And we sort of have a summary of some of the sites here of what you'll be seeing.
So again, each month we would come back for about a week. And in our second month, we began taking on more and more guests. we'd left the boat in Hoonah, so we flew back into Juneau and took a float plane back over to Hoonah.
So you can see our charts here, and we're also studying the Douglas Guide of Southeast Alaska, which is like a Bible. I mean, there's such great descriptions of most of the anchorages and ports, and it helps you figure out where you want to go when you've never been there. This bear showed up right at the end of our hike, so we barely got back to our tender, and he decides to go fishing.
This is me chasing a bear off the dock so I could go to an internet cafe to log into my staff meeting. Literally.
Yeah, hot springs. That was Women's Day, so they have Men's Day and Women's Day.
Every day up there is just magic. Can't believe it.
We were a bit spoiled. We kept our crab in a live well, so when we went to eat crab, it was only minutes old.
This is down in the engine room.
Nice and clean.
This is the Russian Orthodox Church, and my executive assistant's grandfather was the pastor there many, many years ago. A little bit of native dancing.
The First Nations.
Occasionally you get skunked in the crab pots. This is probably our favorite spot on the trip.
You see how the boat's wrapped up there?
A lot of current
A lot of
right
places.
This is going up the Stikine River to another set of glaciers. We're in about a foot of water there.
What is that called?
What's he catching?
We're catching bergy bits, ice for our cocktails.
10,000-year-old frozen ice. So the fishing boat to our right gave us some pointer on where to go fish for halibut. This is their catch.
Holy moly.
Check out our catch.
This is our catch. That's 450 pounds of halibut.
Holy moly. What test
Just
line?
filleting it on the swim step. Look at that.
And you what test line did you use, Holly?
50-pound test.
Whoa.
That's why I say that's probably an Alaska state record. We didn't have a scale on board, but one that big was caught in 1996 on 200-pound test. I set the line out and a friend reeled it, and I had a harpoon that we used. Took 3 of us really to get it in. It's a miracle that we got it in. 7'4" tall. Its mouth would swallow your head.
Really? How long was it, you said?
Hour and a half.
And how tall was it?
Oh, 7'4".
Whoa, unbelievable.
Yeah, no, it's the fish of a lifetime. And we caught it at anchor in 80 feet of water off the swim step.
Uh-huh. And what were you using? This is with a lure?
We had a plastic squid and some anchovy, right?
Herring.
Uh-huh.
Herring.
Herring.
And you were casting for it?
No, it was
No.
it was just sitting there on the bottom.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So it was really funny that morning because Jeff really hadn't touched a fishing pole the entire trip. And I'm talking and making breakfast, and I look back, I baited it, and I look back, and there he is throwing it out off the swim. So I'm like, look at that, Jeff's fishing. And then, of course, he lost interest in 2 seconds, put it in the pole holder, and forgot about it.
Then I took the girls off to go hiking, and when I motored back, the line started hitting. Just as I pulled the tender back up to the boat, my buddy Lynn, who's a good fisherman, was on board. So he grabbed the rod, I got on board. It ran 3 times. I have a good sized harpoon. The first time I hit it through its lung, and it wouldn't go all the way through. It's a harpoon that has a barb on it that's tied to the boat. So the first time I hit it, it ran. The second time I hit it right in its brain, behind its eye. And it's about 10 inches or 12 inches thick. So this big harpoon would not go through it, even through its head. The third time it came back up, it was tiring and bleeding out. I was able to go through its mouth and tie it up to the boat. And then with both the harpoon and the gaff, we got it on board. And with the crane for our tender,
Right, yeah.
we were able to lash it, rig it, and get it up.
Unbelievable. So now you got 400 pounds, 450 pounds of halibut. Talk to us about next steps.
It wasn't easy because the Tanaketchikan was out of ice.
Oh no.
We make a good quantity on board, but we were able to get it all in coolers. We got some ice, we got some dried ice.
We froze a bunch.
And we
because
froze, we
have
have a
freezers.
couple of freezers on board, so we froze some. And then we gave some away, and then our friend Lynn flew back the next day and he brought most of it back down to California in coolers.
Like 200 pounds or what?
Yeah.
Probably at least, yeah.
Amazing, amazing. Fresh, caught by his buddies. That's
And it
great.
was delicious, by the way. There's a saying about when you get an older halibut, the fish isn't good. This was every bit as good as any halibut you'd ever taste.
What's your guess on the age?
You know, it's really hard to tell. I was trying to research that. And I guess the females grow faster than the male. But I could not ever come up with a definitive. I mean, if I had to guess, I'd say probably 30 years, 20, 30 years old.
Mm-hmm. How long a line did you have? How long were the runs?
Oh, when it ran several hundred feet. Each time it ran 3 times on us.
What was the current when you caught this fish? What was that circuit?
Almost none where we were. We were anchored in a really quiet cove. Interestingly, we were anchored in a spot that the fisherman who sent us there said, you won't catch halibut here, but you should anchor here.
Because it's really pretty.
And then go fish this other area. And when he was still in port in Ketchikan when we came back. It was the talk of the town. I mean, the town, Lynn and his wife went to all the bars and showed pictures. And they were like, to some they were celebrities and to some they were villains, because it was a female and there were, millions of eggs inside this fish.
And so now you said that you have a water maker that does 700 gallons a day. How often were you using water maker and how often from the tanks?
I'd say 50-50. When we're out away from the towns, you'd always we have about 280 gallons of tank capacity on board. And so we'd always fill when we'd go into a town. And it was a little tricky because in some of the glacial areas where there's a lot of silt or sediment in the water, the glacial flour, it's called, you go through filters pretty quickly.
How often were you changing the filters in the water maker?
Too often, but more than once a week, every few days even. There was also an algae bloom when we first got up to Juneau. And so there was a lot of algae in the water we're definitely glad we have it. And you don't want to go without it. There were weeks when you don't have any fresh water available.
And a lot of the ports don't offer fresh water.
And it may not be very high quality either.
What about other engine maintenance? How often do you change the fuel filters and so on?
We just did them once along the trip, and oil filters once. I think we actually we changed out all the oil at one point as well.
How much motoring time on the engines on the trip and how many miles?
We think of it as about 4,000 miles overall. And I just do the math. At 10 knots, that's 400 hours.
So tell us about dog sledding. How'd you organize it? How'd you get there? How much time did you spend with him?
We could have spent a lot more time if it was up to me. It's so fun to be up there with all the dogs, and I'm an animal lover. You take a helicopter from Juneau up to the top of the Mendenhall Glacier. They have a whole camp. The young people that work there are up there in like 3 to 4 week stints, and then before they come back down, they're training some of the dogs. Some of the dogs are just there for conditioning for like the Iditarod.
There's probably 300 or 400 dogs in the camp up there.
And they encourage the guests to play with the puppies, which my daughter's quite the animal lover also. So that was a lot of fun.
When the dogs are in a harness, how many in a rack?
In a string? Yeah, maybe 10, 12.
Okay.
And they just love it. They are so happy. They are fired up and want to go. And there's a lot of joy you can see in all of the dogs' lives up there.
Great video, by the way, just terrific.
Thank you. So in this video, you should look for a place they do mining. That's where we were moored.
These are having the props pulled in the machine shop that retooled them for us. Watch for the diver here. Look at this guy. It's right out of Jules Verne.
So this is another bear viewing experience we had.
So these are black bears here.
Look at all the fish in the water there. Isn't it crazy?
The
Amazing.
bears are very particular. That one just bit into a male, and it could tell by how firm it is, and he let it go. They only take the females.
That's just this place. Yeah, these are like the connoisseur bears of their salmon.
So what they'll do is they'll take a female and they'll set it up on the bank and fillet it open
And eat the eggs.
and just eat the eggs and leave the rest for the seagulls.
So this is a hatchery where the fish swim up, they get egged and milked and they spawn out the eggs and replant them.
We're now coming back. I think we're down into Canada about at this point. The clouds every single day will just
Yeah, so
blow
this
your
is a
mind.
moonset that was particularly beautiful.
But every sunrise, every sunset is just magic up there.
Bergy sighting, Bergy sighting. Now, what is this? Tell us about this
I
bread.
bake gingerbread about once a week on board.
This is Lowe's Inlet. This
Coming.
is one of my favorite places.
Wow.
Holly caught a few dozen salmon here. Look at the bear. She's fishing right below the bear. Lots of old abandoned canneries and
Towns.
towns. A little place called Buttedale.
So they actually have a bowling alley in there.
How good were your charts for all these old structures?
Not great.
How good was the fathometer?
That was pretty good. Yeah, and we also have sonar on board that we use in tight spaces.
Guess what they mine here in Ocean Falls, which is a ghost town.
What? Not silver. What?
I'll show you out when okay, right there in that building.
Not silver.
Bitcoin. That building's full of Bitcoin servers.
Oh,
Maybe
really?
not anymore.
This was our favorite white sand beach.
So we're on the Pacific coast on this side. We walked across the island
How much of what you ate was what you caught?
a lot.
Everything alive. That's our main food source. Those are orcas we saw there.
Now we would keep, because we have this live bait well on the swim step, and it would be filled halfway with crab almost all the time. So we could have crab anytime we want. Plenty of fish on board.
So was it 50% of what you ate?
50% Holly?
Yes.
Probably so.
Uh-huh.
This is a hike up to a little lake that was swimmable.
Finally, warm water.
Did you go fishing in the lake?
No, just swimming.
How cold was the water?
It was wonderful. It wasn't too cold at all.
Okay, so they're stacked up. So that's a stack. Those are stacks of them.
Mhm.
Okay, so those are sacks of silver.
Well, there
Pop.
are these little cylinders. That box is called a monster box.
Okay,
And it's, so you buy it in that quantity, and that's about $14,000 worth of silver coins
okay.
that are now worth 20.
And you knew the monkey good for silver? Were you tracking it or what?
Yeah, we were midway along Vancouver Island, motoring down back to Washington, when we called a friend in Costa Rica who had told us about a silver dealer in Nanaimo. The guy in Costa Rica called the silver dealer in Nanaimo, British Columbia, told him we had cash on board. And so we arranged to have $14,000 worth of silver delivered to the boat. The guy rode up on a little motor scooter. It was a scene right out of James Bond. Had this monster box of silver on his shoulder, rode right up to the boat. We traded him $14,000 in cash for all these silver coins.
What amazing.
And it's appreciated. It's again, $14,000 in silver is now worth about 20,000.
And
I just figured it was an interesting investment and a fun thing to do along the way.
yeah, got it. How safe did you feel doing that?
Oh, fine. I mean, we have a safe on board, so the coins are in the safe now, and it was just an interesting experience.
Yeah, got it. Okay, easy. Well, how about ATMs up where you've been traveling in Alaska and everywhere? How often did you have to be anywhere near money?
We really didn't. I think I brought $15,000 or $20,000 worth of cash on board. I just put a good stash of cash on board, so we really didn't have to go. And we used our ATM or debit card for fuel. You know, when we take on fuel, it'd be $4,000 or $5,000 worth of fuel at a time. This is one of the captains that ran along with us, a really cool guy.
How often would you have a captain on the trip?
I'd say about a third of the time we did. Training up, we did.
But coming down, we didn't. Once I got on board.
So the value of the captain was you'd learn about the boat or learn about the
local knowledge.
Okay.
Yeah, how to operate in icebergs and, you know, the big debris fields. And
so this is Bouchard Gardens at night.
Went to a concert there. It's lovely.
Yeah, I've been there. Wonderful. Very nice.
Yeah, for those going on the Commodore's cruise, if they can take time to go over to see Bouchard Gardens, it's well worth the time.
So
it's one of the most beautiful botanical gardens in the world. And you can anchor right in the cove on the backside and take your tender in the back gate.
Lisa Claremont and Harold Kleiderman took me up to Bouchard Gardens. What a beautiful sight.
So this is
now we're back in the US. We're in Roche Harbor, which is also one of the stops on the Commodore's cruise. That's the Hotel de Haro. It's a lovely port, but it's this is waving goodbye to Teak and Holly. She's headed home.
What an incredibly fun trip. How long did you plan before you set off on the trip?
Oh, we started getting the boat ready probably 6 months in advance. And just, you know, again, dialing in all of the electronics, the new water maker, adding sonar,
freezer.
Put a freezer in for the fish. Yeah, really iterated on the boat.
Tell me something you learned.
Well, I can tell you a big one.
Sure.
So it was a one of the rougher, windier days. It got that way. And Jeff and my son-in-law were napping, and my daughter and I were cruising the boat. And she's pretty short. She's 5'2". I'm only about 5'4". But there is a breaker switch for the anchor right here by the helm, the wheel. And one of us must have tripped it, but we didn't know that until we finally got into Myers Chuck, which was about the only place to get out of the wind and anchor for the night. We get in there, and Jeff and Zach are all hands on board. We're getting ready to put the anchor down, and lots of boats. I mean, it was going to be a tight anchorage. We go to put the anchor down, won't go down. And we're just like, what are we going to do? Oh no. And it was like, thank goodness we actually had cell coverage at that point. We called our mechanic. I mean, in the meantime, we're trying lots of things. We get hold of Len. He's like, well, did you try the what do you call this? An anchor?
No, it's a circuit breaker.
A circuit breaker, because probably one of us with the short legs in the captain's chair accidentally hit
it. So we got it figured out. Yeah.
That's a great story to share, though, because everybody makes goofs here and there. Tell me something funny. Tell us something funny.
A funny goof?
No, just something funny that happened on the trip.
Well, there's a lot. I don't know if we can say this on public TV.
Which one?
You're going to blush. No, we're not going to do that.
Okay,
You
tell
can.
us when you got scared.
Well, hiking up that 1,000-foot wall of scree with no harness. So we were already pretty fatigued after the ice caving. There was a lot of first on that trip, so I'd never had used crampons to go across the ice. And it's not just flat walking. So we walked about a mile. It's up and down, and then you get to where the cave entrance is. And then I'd never rappelled before. So then rappelling down, that was pretty scary. Being in the cave actually was not scary. It was very cool and cold in there. And then coming out again, climbing these wall of scree with no ropes, no harness, no safety. You just have to get up there, and all that's coming down. Also on that trip, Jeff, you saw rappelled down first. His harness sort of came undone.
My harness failed right as I went over the edge, which was pretty wild. I'd climbed a lot in college, and it's pretty comfortable rappelling.
That was scary.
But the type of harness that they had needed a second loop to the buckle that we didn't do. And so my harness literally peeled off right as I went over the edge. There's a backup safety on it, so it didn't come all the way off, but I went down sideways, 120 feet down into the ice cave with a kind of wonky harness on. That was really scary. And I don't scare easily.
I was scared on top of it.
I've been in a lot of tough situations in life, and this was right up there.
So how often and where did you have internet coverage, and how often and where did you have cell coverage?
No, good question. I paid $30,000 or $40,000 for a KVH cell booster, and the darn thing never worked.
Never.
I flew an electronics guy up from here to try to fix it. It never worked. So about the first half of the trip, our coverage was terrible. And I was trying to work from remote places, and it was a mess. And so when I flew home for the 4th of July rodeo at the San Mateo County Mounted Patrol, where my daughter was the rodeo queen and I carried the American flag in the grand entry, I went online and to Starlink on a Tuesday and ordered an $800 dish. It didn't say when it was going to come. We were leaving that Friday to go back. So I ordered it. By miracle, it showed up on our doorstep 2 days later on Thursday in a box. We stuck the box on the airplane. This is $800, including the first month's coverage. Plugged it in when we got back to Alaska and had perfect connectivity for $135 a month. It was a miracle. I could be on Zoom calls, cell phone, text.
It truly was plug and play, which there's hardly any electronics that live up to that.
Although the negative side of it, I would tell you, is it really changed our guests' experiences. For the first month and a half when we had almost no connectivity, nobody sat there on their phones or texted or sending pictures. And for the second half, people reverted to their behavior patterns, that they enjoy down here. And I'd say it detracted a bit. We're going to think about how we manage that when we go back this summer.
So did that provide internet access, or was there a separate?
No,
Yes.
yeah, absolute. Yeah, powered up our
Internet.
Last set of questions is about the upcoming Commodore's cruise. Are you guys going to be on the Commodore's cruise?
Yes, we plan to. I don't know if we'll make the whole part of the cruise, but we hope to be there. We'll be on our way back down from Alaska.
So your boat will be up there for part of it. Okay.
Yeah, we hope so. That's our plan.
Jeff and Holly, what an incredibly fun adventure you've shared with us. People constantly talk about going cruising. You did it. People talk about exotic locations. You went to amazing exotic locations. People talk about doing things that are a little bit scary and having funny things happen to them. All that happened with you guys. Did you bring back a bear?
No bear, but probably 100 salmon and a lot of halibut and
Rocks. We brought
all
all my pretty rocks back. I love rocks. And the rocks up there are so magnificent.
There were probably 500 to 1,000 pounds of rocks on board Teak and Holly. Holly is a nut, but she's a good nut.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
I'd just say one last thing, Ron, is every single day of this trip was about the most magical day you can imagine in your life. I mean, it literally every single day we saw something, we did something that's just mind-boggling, just completely head-spinningly cool. and just would encourage everyone to go. I mean, we're looking at it as we may go back every year for the rest of our lives. It's that good. And we've been a lot of places in the world. We've done a lot of things, but it's just magic up there. The people is another point I would make to the group. Is the scenery is majestic, but the people are among the most wonderful people you'd ever meet in your life. Every single day, we would meet a different, interesting person, and they became friends for life. And it's an experience that shouldn't be missed by anyone.
Well, Jeff Birdwell and Holly Winnen, thanks very much for sharing your great tale with the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon.
Our pleasure.
My pleasure.
This has been a presentation of the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon.